Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the matrix. Now that we've exposed the nonsense of Hughes' simulation of what occurred that night, let's actually focus more on the source that provided that nonsense. Skeletor and Dateline NBC had obtained information from a so-called source that claimed Xana went upstairs to check on her housemates. This source is also responsible for other leaked information, such as the claim that Kohberger targeted Madison. Now Judge Hippie, yes, you heard that correctly, Judge Hippie apparently has enforced a gag order as a result of the recent leak to Dateline NBC, who dumped it out there publicly. Quote, the judge presiding over the case against Brian Kohberger issued an order on Thursday, following concerns over sensitive information leaked in a recent Dateline NBC episode. The order responds to a Dateline episode titled The Terrible Night on King Road, which reportedly disclosed non-public details about the case. Okay, let's stop right here for a moment. The leaked details are about Kohberger targeting Madison, and Xana had gone upstairs. We're just going to suggest that Judge Hippie is concerned that the information or claims will be researched by the public and could come back to haunt the prosecution. Mind you, this is information that they will be using as evidence to support the motive. Hopefully everyone understands. He wouldn't care if it was, quote, speculation that was presented, so it has to be what the prosecution will be utilizing in trial. Let's continue. Quote, the judge stated that it appears likely that someone currently or formerly associated with law enforcement, the prosecution, or the defense counsel violated the court's non-dissemination directive. Such actions, the court noted, undermine the rule of law and threaten the ability to seat an impartial jury, potentially complicating the trial process. Yeah, like these judges willingly disputing the credibility of Taylor's inquiries into the IGG process, denying motion after motion to prevent the defense from challenging certain so-called evidence. What about the judges basically ignoring the fact that there were 3 additional males' DNA discovered in the home, even blood? That by itself should warrant a dismissal. Yet, those males are still walking around without ever being brought in for questioning. Talk about undermining the rule of law, right? Or how about shutting down Cyre's testimony and geolocation data of Kohberger's cell phone, which places him southwest of Moscow? They're posing as judges because the real judge would have dismissed the case a long time ago, and a new investigation would have followed. Kohberger could still be brought up on the charges, yet the dismissal based on those additional males would change everything, including the mainstream media's approach to the case. Anywho, to address the breach and deter future violations, the court issued a preservation order targeting all individuals who have worked, directly or indirectly, for law enforcement or prosecution agencies involved in the Kohberger investigation. These individuals are prohibited from deleting, discarding, overriding, destroying, altering, or otherwise making unavailable any of the following: documents, files, metadata, emails, text messages, direct or private messages, phone logs, or communication logs, whether electronic or in material form. Records related to communication with third parties, such as media representatives, concerning the Kohberger investigation, allegations, or the homicide case. This directive applies to records on both work-owned and personal devices or accounts, including messaging apps. All automatic deletion or overwriting features on relevant devices or accounts must be disabled immediately. The preservation requirement remains in effect until further court order. Unquote. What does it sound like to you? It sounds like damage control to the chaos, because it is, by definition. Yet wasn't this the court order in the beginning? All of those gag orders included all of these activities by the same parties. Yet someone decided, hey, I don't care what the judge ordered, I'm leaking information to Skeletor and Dateline NBC. Now think about it, who would do this? Someone or a group who was so nervous about the change in perception in the case that they threw out a kamikaze attack to reiterate the narrative that Kohberger was the killer. Who would know that Kohberger stalked Madison, you see? Yep, the slithering FBI is behind this. The source is presented as anonymous, but we know the FBI is behind this. And this is why the judge went into damage control, because if it comes back that the FBI leaked this information to the mainstream media, then you have a government agency intentionally violating court orders and the law by the way to make sure the public is convinced Kohberger was the killer. And don't think the prosecution is sitting back, oblivious to that covert tactic. They are working together, my friends. If anyone recalls, NewsNation claimed that there was digital evidence that Kohberger had followed Kaylee and Madison. Everyone remembers that? Okay, now in the true crime community, has anyone found any evidence of this claim? The only information that was discovered was a screenshot of the alleged Koberger's Instagram profile. Yet that profile hasn't been verified to be his account, and even the prosecution hasn't made this claim. Mind you, they have never established a motive. So if they haven't established a motive, and yet somehow there is digital evidence he followed, or in this case, stalked Kaylee and Madison, why isn't the prosecution adding this to their list of evidence? Isn't it verified? Oh, it's not. So what gives here? Let's dig into that for a moment.
Before we examine the screenshot, let's go over the claim. Quote, among the never-ending questions surrounding the murders of Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan was, did they know their killer? In an affidavit outlining the case, investigators say DNA, cell phone records, and surveillance camera evidence link the accused murderer, Brian Koberger, to the crime. But his defense attorneys say in a court filing that there is no connection between Mr. Koberger and the victims. Okay, now keep in mind, the defense immediately presented this argument. Quote, criminologist and CBS News consultant Brianna Fox adds that the defense is claiming that the defendant and the victims have absolutely no connection. There's no motive. There's no reason for this crime to take place. So essentially, it's raising additional doubt in jurors' minds. Again, this is a major problem for the state. Despite the DNA without a motive, how does the alleged Koberger specifically go to this specific home and murder 4 victims without a connection or motive to motivate him to do so? Well, this is where the so-called digital evidence popped up out of thin air. Quote, but Kaylee's parents, Steve and Christy, believe they have proof of a connection. In the minutes after learning Koberger's name, Christy says, we went online and immediately started Googling. Steve adds he was a PhD student at Washington State, they told us. We're like, PhD, what the heck is going on? Who? Unquote. In the minutes after learning who the alleged killer was, they went to search Google for information on him. Okay. Didn't seem like they were searching online prior to Koberger being arrested, right? Tend to think they would be looking for answers, some type of connection from someone that the housemates knew. After all, this is what Christy stated. Christy believed it was someone they knew, yet they weren't searching online for any type of evidence that someone was stalking. Anywho, let's continue. Steve and Christy talked with 48 Hours correspondent Peter Van Sant for the night of the Idaho student murders. They say they discovered digital evidence they say showed a tie of Koberger to 2 of the victims. Yep, so let's go back, all the way back to that News Nation episode. If you recall, they claimed that a source close to law enforcement obtained digital evidence that Koberger may have stalked some of the housemates. Yes, well, what do we have here? Mainstream media is concealing the identity of Steve and Christy as the law enforcement source. This spells trouble, my friends, because claiming there is a law enforcement source, everyone assumes this is more than likely a private investigator. Now, they did hire a private investigator, yet what if they are the ones who provided the private investigator with the so-called digital evidence? Christy stated that minutes after learning who the alleged killer was being Koberger, she stated that, quote, we went online and immediately started Googling, unquote. There was no mention of a private investigator doing any of this Googling and researching. And now we have to assume that the source behind the scenes is predominantly Steve and Christy and their so-called private investigator. Who knows, that private investigator could simply be an FBI agent in disguise. Keep in mind, Kaylee's parents are the only family members who are actively involved in the case, and even the investigation. Yet if Madison was the target, why isn't her parents just as eager to? Wait, so can we suggest that Kaylee's parents are the ones who claimed Madison was the target? How the hell would they know this? Okay, let's calm down. Quote, in the interview with Van Sant, the Gonzalez family provided screenshots of an Instagram account they believe belonged to Koberger. Those screenshots include what they say is Koberger's Instagram profile and a list of people he was following, including Maddie Mogen and Kaylee Gonzalez. 48 Hours has not been able to confirm the authenticity of this account. Oh, okay, so how can we verify the claim without authentication? Did they contact Instagram to verify the account? Never mind, it's not important, I guess. Christy says when they attempted to cross-reference the accounts of Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan, it appeared that this Koberger account had interacted with Maddie's Instagram. You would go to Maddie's Instagram account and look at her pictures, and he liked them, Christy said. He had liked them. Brian's name was under a loft of Maddie's pictures. Liked her pictures, liked that picture, and that picture, and that picture. So he was actively looking at the Instagram account, unquote. But it was Kaylee that apparently suffered the more severe injuries than Madison. And remember, Kaylee's parents tried to allude to Kaylee being the target at that point. If we recall this was before Kohberger was arrested, we will grant them that. But if Kaylee suffered more severe injuries, this means she was a tougher challenge than Madison. Yet you're not just stabbing Madison once and move on to Kaylee. So when the alleged lone killer is attacking Madison, Kaylee wakes up or physically engages in some manner. The point here, it's all bullshit. But let's continue, because it comes back around to Skeletor. Quote, the Gonzalveses say the account is no longer active. It disappeared shortly after Kohberger's arrest, on the same day as a celebration of life ceremony for Kaylee and Maddie. By the time we got home from the celebration of life, it was gone. The Instagram account was gone, Christie says. Kohberger's trial has been set for June 2025. A judge entered a not guilty plea on Kohberger's behalf. Unquote. Oh, how convenient that the account was terminated after he was arrested. That's interesting, right? Okay. Now in the article, they have a screenshot of the alleged digital evidence. As you see here, you have Madison and Kaylee's profile. If you look at the fine print, who provided this screenshot? That's right, Steve. Now keep in mind, Kaylee's parents decided to search the internet to obtain information about Kohberger after he was arrested. This indicates that they were searching for some type of evidence that he may have been stalking the victims, right? Yet it's quite odd that law enforcement never confirmed that he stalked anyone, despite the alleged digital evidence. Remember, Bill Thompson refuted this claim in previous hearings that Kohberger stalked any of the housemates, deeming it to be, quote, mainstream media speculation. Oh yes, it was never reported to be official evidence, only a claim by the mainstream media. Yet where did the mainstream media get this claim from? That's right, Kaylee's parents. It's right here for everyone to see. They're the source of that claim. Again, it causes a concern because law enforcement wouldn't disregard it if there was actual proof. Mind you, they've searched his vehicle, they've searched his apartment, they've searched his parents' home, they've searched his online purchases, but they never reported to have come across any digital evidence that he stalked anyone. So there is a claim, or for the sake of this, there is evidence provided that he followed 2 of the housemates, which provides a motive, and yet the prosecution will not accept it as evidence. It seems the claim does not have credibility, and here's why. Now this is the full screenshot of the alleged Instagram profile of Kohberger, but if you notice there is not one R at the end, there are 2. I think the reason the name is misspelled is because if it were spelled correctly, those profiles would not include Madison and Kaylee. In other words, a fake profile was created with his name, but an R was added at the end. Knowing Kohberger, such an account may be private. Since he had an interest in criminology, don't think his Instagram would just be displayed for everyone. That's more of an exclusive group on such a site as Instagram. At least that's what we perceive. Then you have Madison and Kaylee in the list of profiles. But it doesn't say they're being followed by the alleged Kohberger. It's suggesting that they should be followed. If he was stalking Madison, he would have followed her, right? After all, Christie stated he liked all of her photos, but it doesn't say he followed her. Let me break this down a bit more. If he was stalking Madison, he would definitely be following her as well. And by the side of her name, along with Kaylee, it would say, that's right, following. I mean, he would get all of the notifications of their post, their photos, everything. Yet, without following them, he would have to manually type in their profiles every time to view their photos. That's too much hassle for someone who was allegedly stalking Madison. Also, it says that the alleged Kohberger has 775 followers. Seems to be a bit popular, don't you think? According to statistics, the average user has between 150 to 200 followers. Half of all users have between 1,000 to 10,000 followers. So by the looks of it, Kohberger was kinda kicking ass on Instagram, considering the loser creeper narrative pushed. It's not Kohberger, and that's not a shot neither. This is someone who basically changed their profile name after Kohberger was arrested and quickly deleted the account after this bogus screenshot was taken. And get this, it's more than likely someone from the same town as Madison and Kaylee, because most sites and their algorithms suggest profiles locally. There's a snake slithering around. This could be an actual suspect. They're not following Kaylee and Madison, but they're being suggested to follow based on their location. Now, the 107 being followed is not the individuals shown, yet it's highlighting the following tab. This is really suggested. That's why it says follow as a suggestion alongside the accounts. Notice how they never provided those screenshots of Kohberger liking Madison's photos? Kinda hard to produce that if he never followed them. Picking up some shady business from Kaylee's family. You had this! where they claim they searched for Kohberger's social media, presented a screenshot of what they claim is his profile, yet it doesn't show he followed Madison and Kaylee. The last name is spelled incorrectly. No evidence provided that he liked Madison's photos, and the account was no longer active shortly after his arrest. They claim that the same day they came back from this celebration of life, they went back to Instagram, and the account was gone. Now this is not adding up. So after this celebration of life, which was a very emotional event for all of the family and friends, you're telling me that they were worried about searching Kohberger's profile after that event? I would tend to think that his family and friends' time, people coming over to talk, reminisce, and such, laugh, cry, like a funeral. But I guess they were so hardwired to prove Kohberger stalked the victims, they jumped back online to search the account for more evidence. Yeah, it seems more like whoever's profile this actually was deleted it after that screenshot was taken, justifying the claim he stalked Madison. Yep, someone is making noise in those bushes. They can't stay quiet. I wouldn't say it was a fake profile, rather it was a real person, who is more than likely from Moscow. That's why the algorithm suggested following Madison and Kaylee. After Kohberger was arrested, Kaylee's family...
You know what? I'm suspecting Olivia. Yep, sorry, but it just came to me. Olivia also stated that she went to check Kaylee's LinkedIn account, and it was shut down. We pondered, why was she searching her LinkedIn account in the first place? What prompted her to go check that specific account? Well, there is a link to the murders in that LinkedIn account, and she went in to shut it down before the true crime sleuths got a hold of it. Either it's Olivia snooping around, or Steve. Could be working as a team. Think about it, where are the screenshots of the alleged Kohberger liking Madison's photos? Let's go back to Christie's statements, because this is evidence that she is claiming exist. Quote, you would go to Maddie's Instagram account and look at her pictures. He had liked them. Brian's name was under a lot of Maddie's pictures. Liked her pictures, liked that picture and that picture, and that picture and that picture. So he was actively looking at the Instagram account, unquote. So Christie has evidence that Kohberger was liking Madison's photos, yet never provided the evidence. You provided a screenshot of him so-called following Madison. Why not put the nail in the coffin by showing the evidence he liked her photos then? Because it doesn't exist. And she thought that providing the fake screenshot of Kohberger following the victims, then obviously he liked the photos of Madison, right? Not so fast, show it. You see, Christie wouldn't be doing this if there was actual proof. Now keep in mind, Christie stated early on that she felt it was someone they knew. Apparently later on she was compromised. Because this same person, who stated she felt it was someone they knew, which would more than likely be from Moscow, then goes on to literally generate a fake narrative about Kohberger following and liking the victims' photos. This is after the arrest, of course, and to go ahead and make everyone forget about her initial statement or belief, she claims they have digital evidence that Kohberger stalked those housemates. Goes to show that courage is not an attribute most people embrace. 2 incidents that suggest that Kaylee's family is the source of all the lurking in the shadows, presenting these claims that the mainstream media regurgitates. Then there's more. What about the claim that it was Kaylee who was being stalked? Does everyone remember? Quote, Gonzalez, which would be Kaylee here, reportedly told him that the stalker would follow her at night when she was going to or from bars, either by the campus or down on Main Street. Her family has said they were not aware of any stalker, despite the manager claiming it was something she had tons of issues with. Okay, so if Kaylee was dealing with a stalker, why wouldn't she notify her family about it, especially her father and brother? Anywho, she always had to have someone who was constantly walking behind her in order to keep her feeling safe. Wow, really? That sounds very dangerous, right? Yet again, she never notified her brother and father about this danger. Police are now trawling footage from an officer's body cam that may have captured a scream on the night of the murders. The high-pitched sound, recorded at 3:12 a.m., was captured by a Moscow police officer who was responding to an unrelated incident near the University of Idaho. Some web sleuths believe that the sound is a scream, while others think it could be the sound of car tires peeling away. Okay, briefly, so in this narrative, Kaylee was aware of being stalked. Clearly it was dangerous, due to having bodyguards around her to feel safe, and yet she never thought to tell her parents about it. What about her friends? What about her housemates? Nobody decided to tell her parents. Or is it possible that, well, they knew and won't admit they knew? Again, Christie stated she felt it was someone they knew, and not some rando, meaning random, from out of town. This indicates that Christie knew of Kaylee's circle of peers, and within that circle of peers, either directly or indirectly, Those would have been the killers. Now, we're not putting words in her mouth here. This is literally what she is suggesting. If it's not a random person, and it was someone the housemates knew, the first place to check would of course be their social circle. That's what Christie believed. And she was right, but damage control was executed soon after, because it reveals more about those victims and who they were associated with. Anywho, quote, it was also reported over the weekend that Kaylee was afraid of a stalker in the weeks leading up to the murders, something Moscow police denied knowledge of. A vape shop manager claims he discussed Kaylee's stalker with her and Madison 3 weeks before they were slain in their beds. He told News Nation, Kaylee and Maddie would both come in here. They always had a smile on their face. They were the light of the world. Okay, that's filler, stop it. Sorry, but I hate when they inject a bunch of filler to slightly distract from what is being stated. Quote, they always came in with a group of 4 or 5 girls at most. All the time they would come in together. So we assume this was Kaylee, Madison, Xana, Dylan, and Bethany, that's 5 girls. Yet he must not know who the other housemates were, because he never identified them by name. Could be a reason he didn't mention those other housemates who he knew accompanied Kaylee and Madison. I made a joke about them coming in together, that it was nice to see that they were trying to stay safe. Maddie then said, oh, we had a friend of ours be stalked, which is why we travel in a group. She was motioning to Kaylee as she said it. Wow, such vivid memory on this guy, right? Impressive. It seemed as though they were all trying to keep Kaylee safe and be there for her as friends. This was 3 weeks before the murder. Unquote. He's giving specific details. 3 weeks before the murders would be around mid-October. Now, for him to know it was exactly 3 weeks before the murders, it seems he was keeping track of the predicament, right? He knows Kaylee is being stalked, so every day, or whenever they would come to the store, he had to have noted the date, right? Yet, why didn't he decide to call the cops? Surely Kaylee would appreciate his concern. Based on this claim, Kaylee knew who was stalking her. All she had to do was give him the information, and he could have called the cops so they can look into it. They used terms such as terrified, describing Kaylee's state of being while being stalked. But somehow the authorities were never called, her family somehow wasn't notified, and she's just in town being stalked by someone that could potentially harm her. This isn't adding up. The reason it's off is because it wasn't just Kaylee who was being so-called stalked. It was a group of conspirators, targeting the specific targets out of that 5 girls he mentioned. If it's more than just Kaylee being stalked, then there would be multiple stalkers, more than likely. If there were multiple stalkers, then the motive changes. Think about it, if they were always traveling together, he would know the other 3 girls accompanying Kaylee and Madison, but not identifying their housemates indicates that there is something linked to them he doesn't want to reveal. Maybe he overheard conversations, or something was told to him by one of them, and he doesn't want to mention the other girls by name, being the housemates, because it introduces more to the narrative of Kaylee being stalked. He knows something. Let's leave it at that for now. But the stalking narrative here, based on all the information or claims presented, you have Kaylee and Madison who were being stalked, which justifies the claim that the alleged lone killer went upstairs and murdered them first. Yet, if we refer back to the screenshot Christie claims is evidence of a connection with Koberger and the victims, they only claimed he was liking Madison's photos, nothing from Kaylee. But it shows both Madison and Kaylee, right? If Kaylee was initially the one reported to be stalked, then this would have to be Koberger. Yet Christie never claimed he liked both Kaylee and Madison's photos, although he's depicted as following both of them. So it appears Kaylee's family is focusing on Madison. Although, okay, let's make sure everyone understands the point here. It was reported that Kaylee was being stalked. Okay, that was a claim. Although her family claimed to not be aware of it, they basically indicated she was targeted, as her injuries were more severe than Madison's. Again, this was clearly alluded to. If they show a screenshot of the alleged Koberger following Madison and Kaylee, wouldn't they believe that Koberger was stalking both of them? Why only focus on Madison? It's almost like they used Madison as the source for the motive. But I guess they didn't have the same motivation to investigate the claims of Kaylee being stalked. Could have visited Elroy at the vape shop and got information about Kaylee being stalked, right? This would be before Koberger was arrested and charged, you see? Did the family ever call that vape shop and ask to speak to Elroy about what he was told? Apparently not, but after Koberger had already been arrested, now they're trying to find a motive for someone who had already been arrested. It's backwards. They knew about Elroy's interview and what he told News Nation and other media outlets. which at the time, as the investigation still had no suspect or leads, the information about Kaylee being stalked should have prompted them to inquire about it. The only thing they stated regarding that claim is that they were not aware Kaylee was being stalked. Yet after Koberger's arrest, they claim he stalked Madison. And ironically, it's Madison who Skeletor and Dateline NBC claimed Koberger stalked. And they got this from a source, which is Kaylee's family. This is a revolving door of deflection and misdirection. See, the mainstream media made it seem as if the source of that information, being the digital evidence of Koberger stalking the housemates, came from a private investigator. That would be a law enforcement source. But behold, it was Kaylee's family who were the source. The problem, even with all this nonsense, is they essentially frame Koberger as well, you see, because that is not his Instagram profile. It's someone who stays in Moscow who changed their username, pretending to be Koberger, justifying he followed Madison and Kaylee. It's clear here. Again, no screenshots of Koberger liking any of Madison's photos. That's where the evidence would be, right? Kaylee's family is a part of framing Koberger, and it could have been from the early stages of the case. They may have not been the antagonist, but they definitely jumped on board after he was arrested.
Without the screenshots of Koberger liking Madison's photos, you can't verify that his account actually is linked to them in any way, because that would show the actual profile name alongside Madison's post, which would prove that Koberger liked her photos, which would also prove he was following her. Yet Christie claimed he did so, right? Then show the proof. The screenshot that was publicly displayed, in our opinion, is someone who stays in Moscow, and they changed their username to Brian Koberger, attempting to prove he stalked those housemates. It never really caught on, though. The true crime community never really ran with it. Some use it as evidence against Koberger, but generally speaking, nobody accepts this as evidence. Heck, even the prosecution doesn't accept it as proof, because they would have done so back in 2023. And it's not only because it was speculation from the mainstream media, it's because the screenshot doesn't provide actual proof. Another thing that would also introduce two targets, as Kaylee was reported to be stalked, and then Madison was also being stalked. Since Koberger is the suspect charged, then he had a lot on his plate, trying to murder two targets at once. But you see, this is why Skeletor pushed the narrative that Koberger was shocked that Kaylee was in Madison's bedroom. Oh yeah, nice try, but you're still not making sense. Why would he be shocked that Kaylee was there when he's entering a fucking house where he knows Madison lives with numerous housemates? It's not like she stayed alone, so he would already know there would be multiple people in the home. Also, being a stalker, Koberger would actually be in Moscow, following Madison's every move that night, at a distance. But then here's the anomaly. If Kaylee was so concerned about being stalked, to where Elroy claimed she was always accompanied by her peers every time she went out, how does the stalking narrative shift to Madison, where there's no report of her being stalked by anyone? Elroy claimed that Madison was aware that Kaylee was being stalked, right? Yet no one decided to contact the authorities? They knew who the stalker was. Kaylee was aware of this alleged individual. But her sister didn't know, her brother didn't know, and her parents didn't know. Again, they claimed they were not aware of Kaylee being stalked. Sure, we can say Kaylee didn't want to worry them, but based on the setting being presented, she was actually in danger, right? Yet, at no point did she think to at least notify her family or even Moscow PD. What it appears to be is this so-called stalker is being depicted as one person, but in reality that whole group, being the girls in the home, were being followed by multiple people. And that couldn't be revealed, of course, because it proves that there were not only multiple targets, but also multiple killers. And another element that would be introduced is the motive behind it, based on multiple victims and multiple killers. That is a totally different setting than the alleged lone killer murdering 4 college students. Yet if Madison was the target, then why wasn't there a claim that she was the one being stalked? Simply replace Kaylee in Elroy's bogus interview, and it would be Madison who was being protected. We have to keep reiterating, it was Kaylee's family that provided that screenshot of an Instagram profile depicted as Koberger's, following Madison and Kaylee. Christie stated that he liked Madison's photos, which would mean she physically saw his profile name alongside Madison's photos, which would also mean she searched his profile as well. But where's the content? Where are the screenshots of Koberger liking Madison's photos? Where are the screenshots of his Instagram account? She claims that after the ceremony, the Instagram account was no longer active. Now here's the problem. It is basically alluding to law enforcement closing the account, right? Yet, they would have a motive based on what Christie claims. This wouldn't be kept a secret. It would be reported that he stalked Madison and followed her and Kaylee on social media. Bam, he's toast. Yet the profile has the last name spelled incorrectly, and it's not actually following Madison and Kaylee. Again, if Christie searched that profile and obtained all of that information, wouldn't she provide this information to law enforcement? There was no report from law enforcement that he stalked anyone. The prosecution has rejected this claim. They wouldn't reject it if it was a fact, because it's evidence that summarizes their case. DNA, surveillance, and a motive. The prosecution would be stomping their feet in court, awaiting the guilty verdict. In fact, there would be no trial. So who closed the account after the ceremony? Well, we suggest that the account belonged to someone either in Moscow or was, get this, related to one of the victims.
And see, this is why we don't address the families. It doesn't end well for them. We try to keep them in a respectful space, but it becomes difficult to do this when their actions start to reveal suspicion. I think everyone has come to the consensus that they knew what the motive was, and we just start from inside the home and work our way outward to the family and friends. Dylan was involved. Bethany could have been involved as well, and both of them covered it up. This is a fact. We all know that they were awake and aware during the attacks and then the murders. If they were aware of the attacks, then the murders, then they also were aware of the motive behind the murders. So if they knew, then the college circle knew. That spans out to distant friends. Parents are notified, and so on and so on. WSU Kim knew, right? The point here is it appears that Kaylee's family not only knew the motive behind the murders, but felt it was important to contribute to proving that the suspect charged with the crime had a motive to murder those housemates. And they didn't have to do that. They should have just sat back and let the process unfold. He was already charged with the crime. You were in the process of getting justice with that arrest, you see? But for some reason, they needed to verify that he had a connection to the victims and display it to the public. This was a horrible mistake. That's law enforcement's job, the FBI, even a private investigator. But Kaylee's family took it upon themselves to prove a motive, and all it revealed was that the screenshot of the alleged evidence of a motive was not Kohberger's account, but it was someone's account that suggested Madison and Kaylee's profiles to follow, which means it was local. But they didn't think it through. What you say can come back to haunt you. So eager to make themselves look like concerned parents, trying to get justice, they hold an interview where they literally state they searched for Kohberger after his arrest and came across the Instagram account. This was deemed, quote, digital evidence that he stalked those housemates. But the mainstream media depicted the source of this digital evidence as a law enforcement source, not Kaylee's family. That is a major red flag, because it proves that they were concealing the identity of the source to make it appear that it was a private investigator who has so-called clearance to dig up all of this evidence and work with law enforcement. If it were revealed that it was Kaylee's family, you would ask, why are they doing this instead of law enforcement, the FBI, or detectives, right? Why weren't any other families so eager to prove Kohberger had a connection to the housemates, you see? It's because the reason they were so eager to do this is because, well, they needed to protect Kaylee's reputation. Don't get me wrong, this is not a shot at Kaylee, not at all. But if it is discovered that the motive behind her death is linked to criminal activity, then unfortunately the public would be saddened by her death, but would also factor in her involvement or association with criminal activity. And it sucks to say this, but her death would be justified from the criminal's perspective. Ouch, that hurt a bit. The truth does hurt, though. Olivia and Steve seem to be the main antagonist, while Christy and the brother were a bit more reserved. We keep coming back to the point. Christy stated early on that she felt it was someone the housemates knew. And it was Olivia who somewhat refuted it by saying, we don't know that. This was a form of damage control by Olivia, because it puts the spotlight on the college circle, which Olivia didn't want to become a narrative. Christy also stated that she felt some of their peers were cleared too fast, which in association to the other belief that it was someone they knew. She is saying that some of those peers could have been involved, and they shouldn't have been cleared so fast. Now, where is Kohberger in this equation? The name doesn't exist in the investigation yet. All of a sudden, Christy changes her tune and so eager to search for Kohberger's social media accounts. Where was the same investigative activity when you assumed that the killer or killers were someone the housemates knew? Christy was convinced to keep quiet and go along with the narrative, and we assume this came from Steve and Olivia. Her view of the murders, and who could have been the potential suspects, was something they didn't want the public to believe. because again, they were eager to cover up the motive behind it. To some degree, we can say that Steve initially was suspicious of Jack based on their interaction at the ceremony. Yes, he definitely didn't look happy with Jack, but then he could have been flipped just like Christy was flipped, to just go with the narrative. Olivia, on the other hand, she was the one that said Jack was, quote, 1000% innocent, unquote. She seems to be very close to that college circle in our eyes, which means she knows the truth, and will definitely work to keep it a secret.
Yep, Olivia is just giving off this type of lurking vibe, my friends. Mind you, the algorithm suggests profiles associated with your region, even down to your local city. It's someone who is more than likely from Moscow or from Idaho. Change the username to the person who was charged with the murders. Again, Christie stated they searched Koberger on social media platforms after his arrest. Change the username to the suspect's name. And since Madison and Kaylee were profiles associated with the account based on locality, through the algorithm, their profiles were there. It's also possible that this account was previously following Madison and Kaylee and then unfollowed them, just for this screenshot. The algorithm will still suggest those profiles to follow, even though you unfollowed them, you see? Slick, but not slick enough. You need more WD-40. Listen, they tried, they failed, and now it's all being exposed. No wonder why Kaylee's family has always been running around. It's because they essentially framed Koberger as well. Keep in mind, that screenshot from about 2 years ago is currently being reported as evidence for a motive. And it was Kaylee's family who is responsible for it. They can't be quiet because of their guilt. This is the chaos sector.